On a lonesome Texan stretch of asphalt, two officers decided to, for the sheer thrill of it, ruin a woman's day. They spotted an easy target, a woman driving alone, and figured they could fabricate a charge, share a chuckle, and call it a day. They planted contraband, confident that they held all the cards. But they made one catastrophic error. And what happened next will make you hold your breath. She wasn't just a random driver. This was Annabeth Jones, a director at a federal agency you're about to hear much more about, and she was about to unleash the immense power of the federal government to dismantle their rotten system. The unforgiving Texas sun beat down on the empty highway. The air, thick with a stillness older than the road itself. Inside her dark blue sedan, Annabeth Jones felt the miles accumulate. The quiet rumble of a classic country tune was her only companion on the long journey. For 3 days, she'd been just Auntie Anne, laughing with her sister's children, a world away from the classified briefings and critical decisions she managed. In her cup holder, her phone sat silent. She glanced at her speedometer, 43 in a 45. Everything by the book. Then she saw it, a flicker in the rearview mirror. A patrol vehicle hugging her bumper with a predatory patience. Too close, she thought. She eased her foot off the accelerator, but the cruiser remained glued to her tail. Then the lights flashed, blue and red, cutting through the haze in a silent, arrogant command. Annabeth pulled onto the gravel shoulder, her hands steady on the wheel. She knew the protocol: remain calm, be respectful. But as two officers emerged, a cold knot tightened in her stomach. The older one, a man with a face weathered by sun and a jaw set like granite, tapped on her window. The younger one, a seething cauldron of barely contained aggression, took up a position near her trunk, right in her blind spot. A textbook maneuver to box her in. "Good morning, officer. Is there a problem?" Annabeth asked, her voice even as she lowered the window halfway. The older cop, Barnes, didn't respond right away. His eyes did a slow, invasive sweep from her face to her hands on the wheel. "License and registration," he grunted. "You swerved over the line back there." "No, I didn't." "I don't believe so," she replied calmly. "But here are my documents." With slow, deliberate movements, she retrieved the papers. Every gesture was measured, broadcasting that she was not a threat. Barnes took the license, his eyes lingering on the name. "Jones," he mumbled. He held it a moment too long, then shot a nearly imperceptible nod to his partner. "Cole, I'm going to need you to pop the trunk," he ordered. Annabeth's gaze remained fixed forward. "Is that a request or a lawful order based on probable cause?" Cole shifted his hand, drifting down to his baton. "You got something to hide in there?" "They're pushing for a reaction," she realized. "They want an excuse." "I am well aware of my trunk's contents," Annabeth stated. "And I know my rights." "We don't need to argue," Barnes said, his voice turning sharp. "You comply now, or we do this the hard way." A tense silence stretched out. Knowing the game was rigged, Annabeth pressed the trunk release. A soft click echoed in the stillness. As Cole disappeared to the back of the car, she steeled herself. This wasn't a traffic stop. It was an ambush. A moment later, Cole reappeared, dangling a clear plastic bag filled with a white powder. "Well now, what do we have here?" he said, a smug grin spreading across his face. Annabeth met his gaze in the rearview mirror. "That is not mine." "You sure about that?" he sneered. "I am." Barnes leaned in closer, his breath stale. "You're a long way from home. Out here, things can get real uncomfortable for people who like to argue." She looked him square in the eye, her voice dropping sharp and clear. "I know my rights. I do not consent to this search, and I am requesting legal representation. Immediately. You have presented an item that was not in my vehicle." Barnes's eyebrows shot up in mock surprise. He looked at his partner. "You hear that, Cole? We got ourselves a law professor. Guilty people sure do talk a lot." Cole laughed a short, ugly sound. "I'm not guilty," Annabeth replied, her gaze unwavering. "And if you were confident in your case, you wouldn't need to hide behind insults. You and I both know this is an illegal stop." The older officer's face hardened. He took a step closer, his presence oppressive. "That tone of yours," he murmured, his eyes narrowing. "You think you're someone special. Out here, people learn quick that a badge means you follow orders." Annabeth didn't flinch. She met his gaze, her own eyes like chips of granite. "Then I suggest you follow the law yourself, officer. Get your supervisor on the radio. Now." A dark flash of fury crossed Barnes's face. The sheer audacity of it. This woman in this car on his stretch of road telling him how to do his job. The moment stretched thin, charged and fragile, ready to snap. "Get out of the car," he ordered, his voice now a low, menacing growl. "No," she replied, firm and absolute. "Not without a supervisor present. You have no cause for arrest, and you are holding a bag of narcotics that you did not find in my car." She paused, letting the accusation hang in the air. "The game is over." That's when he broke. With a snarl, Barnes wrenched her door open from the inside. The metal groaned in protest. He grabbed her by the arm, his fingers digging into her flesh, and hauled her from the vehicle. Cole moved in instantly, his movements a blur of practiced violence. They were a well-oiled machine of intimidation. They didn't read her rights. They didn't state the charges. They just slammed her against the side of her car, the heat of the metal searing through her jacket. The handcuffs were ratcheted on, each click a deliberate act of punishment, cinched so tight they bit deep into her wrist. "Not so tough now, are you, Professor?" Cole hissed in her ear. Annabeth kept her back straight, her chin held high. Even as they pushed her toward their patrol car, she wouldn't give them the satisfaction of seeing her break. "This is illegal," she said, her voice shaking with controlled rage, not fear. "I have offered no resistance. That powder was not in my trunk. I demand your badge numbers." They shoved her into the back of the cruiser without a word. Through the dirty glass, she watched passing cars slow down, the drivers' faces a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. They saw what they were supposed to see, a routine arrest. They didn't see two corrupt officers enacting a cruel piece of theater. In that moment, her anonymity, once a comfort, had become a cage. The precinct smelled of stale coffee and industrial cleaner, the scent of cheap, soul-crushing bureaucracy. The desk sergeant, a man whose face sagged with terminal boredom, took her details without making eye contact. "Possession, obstruction," he mumbled, his pen scratching across a form. He turned to his clunky computer terminal and began typing. "JONESANNABETH. His finger slowed. He leaned closer to the screen, his eyes narrowing. A flag had appeared, then another. The sergeant's posture straightened, the boredom on his face melting away into confusion, then disbelief. The screen flickered, displaying an official government photograph next to a title that made the air leave his lungs. Director, Bureau of Drug Enforcement. Classification Level 5. Immediate federal contact required. The sergeant went pale. He looked up at Annabeth, truly seeing her for the first time, and his face was a mask of pure terror. We didn't know," he stammered, his hands shaking as he reached for the phone. I need to get a secure line right now." Annabeth took a step forward, her presence suddenly filling the entire room. The cuffs on her wrists were no longer a sign of weakness but a symbol of their colossal error. "Put the phone down," she commanded, her voice quiet but carrying the force of a battering ram. "Secure this building. Freeze all internal network access. Seal the surveillance records for the booking desk and the sally port. Every log from every squad car is now federal evidence." She looked him in the eye. "This station is under my authority." Less than an hour later, her team arrived. The station was locked down tight. Officers Barnes and Cole were nowhere to be found. They had vanished into thin air. But it didn't matter. The evidence they had planted began to speak for them. The bag of white powder, it turned out, contained a federal tracking code linking it to a high-profile cartel bust. It was evidence that should have been sealed in a secure BDE warehouse 1,000 miles away. They hadn't just framed a random woman. They had used the government's own evidence to do it. With the full force of the Bureau of Drug Enforcement at her command, Annabeth ripped open the department's records. It wasn't just a pattern. It was a hunting ground. Dozens of cases, all targeting minority drivers, all with corrupted or missing body camera footage. And then she found him, Mark Lewis, a 22-year-old kid dead in custody. The official report was a lie, a one-page suicide narrative that his family had fought for 2 years. Annabeth unearthed the evidence they'd buried, a bystander's video showing Barnes and Cole beating the young man into unconsciousness. It was cold-blooded murder disguised as procedure. An informant, finally safe to speak, revealed the scope of the rot. Barnes and Cole were just the grunts in a network that spanned 5 departments. The brain was an insidious ghost protocol known as the Phantom Initiative, designed to make seized drugs vanish from evidence lockers and reappear on the black market. The architect was Walter Flynn, a disgraced former agent who had faked his own death. He was the ghost in the machine. The hunt for Barnes and Cole ended in a desolate corner of the Texas desert. When the BDE tactical team descended, Annabeth was at the front. The moment of recognition on the two officers' faces, the dawning horror as they realized the woman they tried to frame was now the one holding their lives in her hands, was a chilling prelude to justice. They found Flynn not in hiding, but in plain sight, living in a quiet Austin suburb. He sat in a digital bunker surrounded by the glow of monitors, the architect of a phantom empire. He didn't resist when they breached the door. He simply looked up at Annabeth with an unsettling calm, the supreme arrogance of a man who believed he was untouchable. That arrogance was his final mistake. Annabeth's testimony before Congress was not a speech. It was a weapon. She dismantled their network piece by piece in front of a stunned nation. The consequences were swift and merciless. In a packed courtroom, Barnes and Cole, stripped of their badges and their swagger, stood pale and trembling as a judge sentenced them to life in prison for the murder of Mark Lewis and decades more for their corruption. The cameras captured the moment Walter Flynn, the untouchable mastermind, was led into a supermax facility, his digital empire reduced to a 6 by 9 foot concrete cell for the rest of his natural life. The Phantom Initiative was burned to the ground. In its place, a new, fully transparent system was created, named the Lewis Protocol, ensuring no case and no victim could ever be buried again. Justice, Annabeth knew, rarely arrives like a thunderclap. It arrives with the slow, relentless persistence of a good person who refuses, under any circumstance, to be silenced.